So I love this spiritual path. Oh my God, I love it. And I honor everyone who is really, righteously on their spiritual path. On it, which is you. So tell us, who are you? Who is Michael Therese McQueen?
So I'm Michael Therese McQueen. For those who don't know me, I'm from South Jersey, the South Jersey, Philadelphia area. And so, it's a little hood in there. There's a little, it's spiritual, but we'll still beat you down a little bit. And so,
but I'm from Harlem, so I got the same thing going on. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I am a folk magic practitioner within the Catholic Conjure context. Also a tarot reader and diviner. I've also received my degree in theology from St. John's University in New York City. And I'm just here, living it every day. It's every day, it's something new. So
every day. So Catholic Conjure, and you're a tarot reader, and you are also connected to Shinto. I heard you say that in the podcast. So could you tell us about that?
So I do have a practice in Shinto. So for those who don't know, Shinto is the traditional shamanic religion of Japan. And so many people have told me that I've had many lifetimes in Japan, and I lived in Japan for a little bit when I was in college, and that's when I really encountered Shinto, and just kind of visiting the shrines and really visiting and practicing within that cultural context. And there was something there for that really called for me. And after I left Japan, I left Shinto for a number of years. It wasn't until maybe 6 or 7 years later that I felt a call to really reconnect with Shintoism here in the States. And it's not a very broad religion here in the United States. And so I contacted the one permanent shrine that's in Washington State, and I was like, how do I get started? And so they hooked me up with the Kamidana and the Ofuda for the kami. And so I have a veneration of the kami here in my house, but I'm also connected with the Ko-Shinto tradition through Kanazawa Sensei, who is a Shinto priestess who works here on the East Coast. What's interesting about, I think, my connection with Shinto is that Shinto is a very earthy religion. It's very much in akin with the Orisha and the African diasporic religion. There's a lot of overlay there. There's a lot of overlay between those traditions, where it's a very earth-centered practice. It's a very about being in unity with the ebb and flow of the energy of the universe. And of course, the kami, like the Orisha, aren't what we think of as gods and goddesses kind of in our more Hellenistic and Roman approach, or the other polytheistic approaches, is that they are really that energy of the universe. There's that energy, I think, of Amaterasu, who's the energy of the sun. Susanna O, that of the storms and the wind, very much akin to Chango, who I'm a child of Chango also. And so,
Yes. Okay.
I have Oshun and Chango, and so I have the two ones. And so but there's this connection and this overlap that I see in Shinto, and even with my practice with the saints, because the kami are very earth oriented. The Japanese practice of Shinto is very much for earth related things. When I was in Japan, all the school children would run to the shrine when they would have tests, because they wanted to do well on tests. Who did you turn to if you needed extra help with paying the rent? So I think that there's this connection with the Shinto kami that has a nice overlay with the Catholic saints also, because it's like, who do you turn to for kind of these earthly needs? Where of course Japan also has this kind of double practice of Buddhism, which I would say is more kind of the doctrinal, kind of more philosophical kind of aspect of Japanese religion and spirituality, where Shinto is much more of the practical aspect of kind of day-to-day life, and how am I interacting with day-to-day life and the spirits of day-to-day life. And so that's where I really connect with Shinto.
Very fascinating. Is Shinto something like, you know, that we have the exoteric, and we have the esoteric, and we have the outer school and the inner mysteries, and they say that Kabbalah is the inner sanctum of Judaism, and maybe Gnosticism is the inner sanctum spirituality of Christianity, and then that maybe the Sufis are the inner sanctum of Islam. Is Shinto like that, or is it its own thing?
I think it's interesting with any type of Asian spirituality or any type of Asian religion, is that we can't take them on the terms of kind of Western tradition, because there's because my paradigms are not Eastern. So thank you for that. And so, like, you know, like there's definitely an inner dimension to Shinto, but the way that it's articulated is very much through right practice. Like, you know, like it's very much for, like, you know, this is why we bow, this is why we use this specific language for this is why we do that. And it's like the outer practice in kind of interiorizes the internal life within Shinto. And so that's kind of the paradigm where Shinto kind of works.
So by your doing the actions, you are transforming your interior.
Exactly.
Which in the West, maybe it's reversed, that we focus on the interior for the catalyst being the causative factor of action.
Right. Which I will say, though, in Buddhism, it's the opposite way around also, where Buddhism and Christianity have that understanding is kind of the inner kind of affects the outer, where Shinto is very much the opposite, is kind of our outer actions affect the interior. And so...
And that is so true, because even going for a walk in nature changes my mind and my consciousness.
Right.
Even a tea ceremony. Do they have tea ceremonies in Japan?
The tea ceremony is much more of the Buddhist school, and so they do have tea ceremony, but the philosophy of tea ceremony comes from a much more Buddhist mindset than Shinto does. Okay.
Maybe it's another reflection of how we are intentional in our actions in the tea ceremony. It always seemed to feel like to me.
Are you familiar with Marie Kondo?
No.
So Marie Kondo has this...
Marie Kondo, the one that does the joy.
Yes.
Yes, I love that lady.
Yes, we love Marie Kondo, but if you want kind of Shinto from for a Western audience, Marie Kondo breaks it down very well, because a lot of her philosophy comes from it's a much more Shinto Japanese centric philosophy of, like, you know, like when people were making fun of her for like tapping on the book, she's like, you have to tap it to wake it up. And I was like, that makes so much sense from a Shinto perspective, because everything has spirit. You know, everything has spirit, so we have to reignite the spirit. And before we go to the Shinto shrine, we clap our hands and we bow to wake up the kami. And so it comes from that perspective. So I tell people, if you want to understand the perspective and the philosophy, go look at Marie Kondo, because I think that she has a very good way of presenting it to a Western audience.
Oh, I love that. And my big lady that I loved for years, I just dove into her work, was Lillian Tu with Feng Shui.
Yes.
So with the Chinese. So maybe Marie Kondo brings us now the Japanese aspects of that.
Yes, and so because Marie Kondo's is less about kind of the energy flow. It's more about kind of appreciating what we have. It's much more about like what's the point? And I'll admit I'm a big bookworm. And so sometimes I read her work and I just want to like die because she's like she wants me to get rid of them. But it's like but it makes sense. It makes complete and total sense, because if we're not cherishing it and we're not taking care of it, that could go to somebody else to spark that joy in their life. And so it makes sense. I'm not quite there yet, but it makes sense.
What's been my biggest teacher about that is being a nomad, because I call myself a nomad, even though I currently live in this home in Mexico that I've lived in. It's a gorgeous home. I love it. It's beautiful. I signed a lease on it, and I'll be moving soon. And because I'm a nomad at heart, and being a nomad has taught me that wow, I had big attachments to stuff. So I just released stuff. And what I found is that if I had a home with a space in it, I would fill it with something cute. I would just buy. It's not about filling every space with something, even if it's a spiritual significance.
Yes.
Right? It's not about that. So now that we understand your Shinto experience, tell us about Catholic Conjure and what brought you to that. What is that?
So Catholic Conjure, it sounds like such a simple statement, but it's so much. But Catholic Conjure in a nutshell is so our ancestors had a magical worldview. In the beginning, just kind of everything was magic. Our ancestors understood living with the energy of this world and the cosmos and beyond. And so our ancestors would bring that worldview to whatever religion they practiced at the time. And so whether it was the Roman religion, whether it was the Hellenistic, whether it was whatever, our ancestors kind of brought that worldview to the religion of the time. So what happened was, when Christianity took hold as the major religion, and specifically we're talking this conversation for the Roman Catholic manifestation of Christianity, so our ancestors brought that magical worldview to Catholic practice and Catholic devotion. And I think Catholicism is such an excellent understanding of just how a magical worldview has subsisted in an institution as a whole. Because if you look at it, it's just like it's all magic all the time.
All magic. The first time I went to a Catholic church it was on Easter a few years back for Mass on Easter. It was packed. I could not believe how much magic was there. The holy water, the incense, the robes, the chants, the saints lined up. It had everything. It had everything that any ceremonial magician, any practicing magician, and many witches would have in their sacred space. It was like a temple of magic, which I can understand why it has caused a lot of chagrin among Pentecostals, among people who are Protestants, the Protestant religions. And can you speak to that? Because I know you have somewhat of Protestant background, being raised by a Baptist family, and you have the Catholic.
So it's funny because it's like, growing up, I grew up Southern Baptist, and it's like, from the pulpit we hear like, Catholics are the pagans, like, which now that I am, which so I say, I just
wasn't a bad thing.
It wasn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. I just tell people now, it's just like, yeah, like, I was like, my Southern Baptist pastors were right. Like, it's just like, it really is. I'm just like, but I'm okay with it. It's just like, I wish that we could just get okay with it. Like,
Yeah. If you just if you just suck all the judgment out of it, hey. No problem.
No problem. But growing up in a very I wouldn't say staunch Baptist family, we were much more cultural. We weren't the type that kind of went to church every day. I wasn't the main was I had to go on Sunday, and I was like, I was forced to go on Sunday. And
you gotta go to church on Sunday. There ain't no exception to that.
Exactly. There was no exception to that. And so growing up from that Protestant background, excuse me, it's like, you know, like would hear those things, but for me it was very much, I know we had talked in the podcast that there had already been some Catholicism already within the family, with my mother going to Catholic school and being in a household where there was just kind of like a rosary in a drawer that I was like fascinated with. Like I remember being a kid and like playing with this rosary and like, you know, throwing it around my neck and doing like all these different things with it. And I remember that, and it sticks out so prominently in my memory. And I look at that and I was like, you know, like, think that's where that spiritual seed was really planted for me. And when it came up again later, I had recognized it and it was already there.
You know, as I was listening to your story in the podcast, and family, the podcast will be linked below this video. As I was listening to your story in the podcast, can you see the invisible hand of spirit alone? Like when you look back at things, like we weren't planning these things. How did we get just placed perfectly for our path?
It's so funny because I tell people all the time, I was like, hindsight's 2020. Like, you know, like you don't realize what's going on when it's happening. And like, you know, like spirit moves us in the direction that we need to be in. You know, like it's like sometimes you wish that we could cut out some of the BS, you know, that gets us there. But yeah. But you know,
but it's never wrong.
But it's never wrong. Like, you know, it's more us being hard-headed than anything. And so, and
me fighting the path, I've seen where I fought the path because I was afraid. It was resistance coming up. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, you know, even when I was in college studying for theology, I remember I used to be so attracted to like these Doreen Virtue oracle cards, because Doreen Virtue was the one who had
loved those. Oh my goodness, yes, she had that Christian underpinning, even if it wasn't overt. That's why when she said that she was going to become a Christian, it wasn't shocking to me. I applaud everyone in their spiritual journey. I loved her work. It spoke very deeply to me.
Exactly. And it was so good for me because I remember it was my freshman year of college, and then I bought them and they sat in a drawer because I was just so afraid, because like you're taught like you don't do this, like, you know, like this is something that you just don't do. And I remember returning them, and like, you know, and even throughout my time, like it kept coming back to me. When I was in Japan, a friend of mine bought me a deck of tarot cards, and you know, yeah, and I kept them for years, like, you know, and it's like I vacillated backwards and forward in my path with that, like to the point where somebody would scare you again about it, and then like, you know, like there's a whole bunch of tarot cards buried in the backyard of my house because they told us that's what you were supposed to do with it. And so
there's a gold mine behind your house of tarot card decks.
There's a gold mine behind my house, my old house of tarot cards. God bless the people who are living there now if they start digging. Like,
oh my goodness! They said to bury them in the backyard so that they wouldn't have an effect on you anymore.
Yes, because of the devil, and so.
Okay, I get it. It. But how did you come around?
So again, just a little bit about my story. Again, coming from that Baptist background, I converted to Catholicism when I was 18. And it wasn't until I was actually in the monastery and I had met my friend Scott, who really got me on this path. And when I had the oh shit moment of this is what I had been doing basically all my life.
And you have been doing magic all your life.
I've been doing magic all my life. Like, you know, I had basically, it's like I had been practicing basically all my life, and that's why I never really fit in to the paradigms of Catholicism that people were trying to get me into, where it was kind of all about the doctrine and all about the orthodoxy, and it never fit because I had lived this kind of magical path since I was 12 years old, you know, and this is the magical path that had really been presented to me in kind of the Italian framework that it was. And it was when Scott told me, you know, you can do divination with the holy cards. And I think that's when it finally all made sense to me that this is where I needed to be and this is what I needed to be doing. It took me a year or two to actually get back to tarot cards, but we did start with the holy cards and I felt comfortable with that. And then I think I bought Doreen Virtue's Archangel Michael deck. And that
her angel decks, oh my goodness, so beautiful.
So beautiful. And I think that that's what eventually eased me back into tarot, and I could finally feel comfortable in it, and I could see the divine working in it from that place.
Ooh, because tarot is, you're talking about an induction into everything, all the mysteries in like a fire hose dose, right? Them 78 hours. Like, you know, strap your seatbelt on. So I love how spirit progressed you to it. And it sounded like your circuitry was opening, because as we know, this step is, we've got to have the circuitry on point with being able to do this, otherwise your nervous system gets fried, right? So the being has to elevate. So how did that unfold for you to get to tarot and be a reader of tarot?
And be a reader of tarot. Well, I look at my whole spiritual path as a series of the next right steps. And that's how I explain it to people. Because for me, it made sense coming from the background that I came from to convert to Catholicism. And then it made sense for me to go to school for theology. And then when I met Scott and it all kind of clicked, I was like, the magical aspect of it, I was like, this is the right, it felt right. It felt at home in that moment. And I think for me, it was just like, you know, making that connection through the holy cards, because that whole tradition of holy cards and playing cards come from a similar root historically. We know that the first playing cards come out of China, and then we have them in Egypt, where they come up through Italy. And so, like, you know, the whole concept of divination with cards has that Egyptian connection, and then end up in southern Italy with the Scopa cards and things like that. So there's this kind of natural connection with the holy cards and with tarot that just makes a lot of sense when we look at it in a historical connection. And I think once I could kind of mentally make that connection, that's where that path really opened up for me.
And I heard you say earlier in the podcast also that your induction into Catholicism when you were in 6th grade, high school, so forth, was very Italian. So how was that connected to the Italian strand for tarot?
So it's interesting because a lot of the culture that I was raised in, or I should say that I was brought into Catholicism, was this very mystical brand of Catholicism coming from that Italian kind of mentality. And at the time I didn't know it. I just thought this was just like, this is the Catholicism that everybody practices. Like, you know, like
you were in like the magic zone part of Catholicism.
Right. And I just thought that was like, you know, I thought that was across the board. Like, you know, I thought that everybody had this like intense love for the saints, had this intense love for devotion, and this intense love for kind of this mystical understanding of the faith. And and the rude awakening was when I got into college, and I was like, and people were like talking about like all this doctrine and like the Pope said this and did that, and I was like, don't you just want to pray like this novena, like, you know? Like
when are we going to talk to the saints? No, you got to learn the rules, but when are we going to talk to the saints? Like the devotion versus the dogma, huh?
Exactly. And I was like, you know, like, where's, like, you know, I was raised where it's like, you know, we went to like Wednesday night devotion. Like, you know, like that was like our understanding of it is like, you know, you have a problem, like you need a husband, like you go to St. Rita, like, you know, or you're having problems in your marriage, like, you know, like this is the culture that I understood for it, and different things like Saint Michael is in in garlic. Like, you know, like that's a big one that goes through a lot of different Catholic magical traditions, is that the essence of Saint Michael the Archangel is in garlic. And so like these were things that like I the culture that I was in really espoused, but it was kind of the rude awakening of like, this isn't everybody's experience of this.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
question, do you think that even where you were you the only one having this mystical experience? Was everyone having these mystical experiences? What was it like?
You know, I think it's interesting because when my path really opened up when I was in high school, I was really connected. I'm very connected with the Carmelite School of Spirituality, and the woman who would kind of groom me for the next kind of 10 to 15 years of this path was a secular Discalced Carmelite. And the Carmelites really, the spirituality is a very mystical spirituality, and she had a lot of mystical experiences herself. And so I was always, how spirit puts you with the people that you need to be with for the time that you need to be with. And so, like, you know, I always had people to fall back on who had this very mystical kind of understanding of the faith itself. Now, it changed when, like, you know, I started reading tarot with those people, but those weren't the people for me at that time anymore. And so, like, you know,
what you were to have from that.
Right. And so, like, you know, like when things started shifting to a completely magical worldview, you know, that part of my life really fell away. But it's like I definitely was plugged into people as I was walking the path who were having very similar experiences to mine, and who were seeing kind of that mystical overview of the faith. And so when I kind of jumped, I don't even look at it as a jumping ship, but when I shifted more to kind of this kind of folk magic, kind of magical worldview, that definitely changed over time.
Wow, that's amazing. So as a Catholic conjure person, as a Catholic folk magic practitioner, what do you actually do?
So I look at Catholic conjure, first I look at Catholic conjure as being spirit work par excellence. Like, you know, it really hinges on that that devotion to the saints and the devotion to the spirits that you work with. And I think for me that the beginning of Catholic conjure really is making very profound and very solid relationships with the saints, who are your magical allies in this work. You know, we have other magical allies, like we have herbs, like, you know, we have these different elements of it and things like that, but really who are you going to in this practice really are going to be the saints, who are your magical allies in the work that you're doing. Even in the spell work that you're doing, we're going to call in the saints to be our allies, to kind of supercharge that work, and to be our allies in helping in that manifestation process. So I look at Catholic conjure, and what separates it from kind of other folk magic modalities is that really intense and devotional relationship that you cultivate with the saints, and that Catholic devotion overlay that comes in with that.
I love that. I love that. I remember listening to a podcast with Glitch Bottle, and on it was a practitioner of Appalachian folk magic.
Yes.
And oh my goodness, is it at all similar? Are there folk magical practices that you share with other folk magical practitioners?
So the interesting thing about the Appalachian folk magic is that a lot of the Appalachians were Irish practitioners. And so, but they were Irish practitioners who became Protestant. And so it's
so very, they didn't have the Catholic.
They didn't have the Catholic aspects of it, but you do see a lot of Bible work in the Appalachian folk tradition. And what's interesting with the Appalachian folk tradition, and this also extends to the Germanic forms like Zachariah,
and hoodoo, sort of that strain.
And hoodoo kind of, and sort of, and hoodoo is its own thing, but if we look at kind of the Appalachian and specifically the German American, like the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Amish, is that there's, interestingly enough, they all kept this very this connection to the Virgin Mary, which you find very interesting, because even in the Appalachian conjure system, we talk about Mountain Mary, which is this very intense connection with the Virgin Mary, which I think is just kind of an overlay that was kept from those really Irish roots of the kind of the devotional practices to Mary that kind of got kind of weaved into that practice.
Disguised into that, maybe?
And I think it was more just like, they just never got rid of it. It's very much like the Latinos who become Protestant and they can't get rid of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Much to the Pentecostal chagrin, like, you know, like they just can't, like they can't get rid of her. Like, you know, like.
That's right.
And
you know,
so, go ahead.
Continue.
Yes.
I was going to say that, you know, in Bali, it's very fascinating what occurred in Bali, because throughout Indonesia, they say by law, they told everyone they had to become Islamic. So when you go to Jakarta and places like that, it's all Islamic. When you go to Bali, it's still all Hindu. Yeah, it's a different strand of Hinduism than what is in India, than what I saw in India. And in Bali, Bali is the only place I have been to on the entire planet where everyone is on one accord doing the same thing. It feels like one of the most harmonious places on planet Earth. And I do appreciate a melting pot. I love diversity because I grew up in New York City and we just had everything. You know, you get a Cubano sandwich down the street, you get your you get your Mexican, Puerto Rican, you get your Greek, anything you want. Italian, you go to the Jewish neighborhood, get your latkes, get your bagels, and you can get anything, right? Growing up in New York. And I love that. And I saw that in Bali, it was exact different. And we were all harmonious. We didn't have any issues with everybody. The Italian, you know, getting pizza and all, everybody was together.
Right.
And in Bali, I saw everybody was together, yet they were all doing the same thing, like in worship. It just feels like this flavor or this unction, and they're all going in the same direction.
Right.
Feels like.
Exactly. And I think the beautiful thing with folk magic in general is, like, you know, even if our trappings are very different, you know, so much of our mythology is the same. You know, so much, like, you know, in hoodoo, like, you know, we might be calling on High John and Moses, you know, but in Catholic folk magic, like, you know, we'll be doing the same working, it'll be the same herbs and roots and things like that, but it's like, we'll call on maybe Saint Barbara and Saint Joseph, like, you know, instead of, you know, like,
High John the Conqueror, it'll be someone else.
It'll be somebody else. And so,
but it's still got the High John the Conqueror energy.
Exactly. It's the same energy, but it's like, you know, so much of folk practice is so very similar. Or it's like, you know, our mythology and how we understand it and how we understand the energy to work is basically the same. The traditions that really kind of meld with Catholic Conjure, and I should say Catholic Conjure is just an umbrella term for a lot of different cultural practices, because, you know, we have this practice within the Southern Italian tradition and the Italian tradition in general. We have practices that are Irish in their conception. We have those that are Spanish, we have those that are of Latin and South American descent, and of course we have kind of the African diasporic conception of these also, like, you know, even in the African diasporic religions that have taken on the Catholic veneer to kind of cover their practices. So there's a lot of variation within the Catholic Conjure umbrella. There's a lot of rooms, and I tell people there's a lot of rooms for somebody who's orthodoxly Catholic, that, like, you know, they follow the book, and there's those of us who are on, like, you know, who are basically pagan, and, like, you know, we incorporate these Catholic practices into our work. And I was like, there's a lot of variance within the umbrella of Catholic Conjure. for anybody to really kind of find their way in that.
Wow. I love that, how welcoming it is, and that every person can find a room in that house if they want to. If they're called to, they can find a room. And that is true of spiritual paths. That spirituality is, if you want it, you can have it. You can go in that direction, right?
Like, you know, there's a way of working it. And I think the beautiful thing about Catholic Conjure is that you can't appropriate Catholic Conjure, because I tell people Christianity has appropriated everything. So it's like, you know,
Christianity is the major appropriator. They took everybody's stuff.
Exactly. And
because then they spread it all around the planet.
And they spread it all around the planet. And I was like, you know, like, it's like you can't appropriate Christianity. And it's funny because, like, we look at the social media debates and they're like, well, you're appropriating this from Christianity. And I was like, well, you can't appropriate it from Christianity because Christianity has appropriated everything. And so and so, like, you know,
questions about the whole appropriation thing, period, because nothing belongs just to one group of people.
Exactly. It's and I understand where people come from in that debate, because it is about the respect, and it's about the understanding.
For sure, honor, reverence, and I'm always very respectful of people's traditions. Yet I never met a spiritual tradition or a path that said, no, I'm only for Black people, or no, I'm only for white people. It just never happened, right?
Never happened. And the spiritual path that calls to you, like I tell people, like, you know, like, if the Orisha are going to call to you, they're going to call to you. They don't care who the fuck you are. Like,
that's
you know,
right. They're like, get over here.
Get over here, exactly. And so, and it's like, you know, I feel it's the same with the saints. Like, you know, if the saints call to you, they don't care who you are. You know, they don't care what practice you're in or anything like that. If they call to you and they call to work with you, they're going to work with you, you know, regardless of where you fall in. But I think when we talk about kind of appropriation, I think it's about respect, and I think it's about respecting where these traditions come from and how they manifest. For me and my Catholic Conjure and how I like to teach Catholic Conjure from a perspective of whatever cultural context you come in. This can be adapted for you, like, you know. So I don't teach necessarily an Italian-based Catholic Conjure. I don't teach a Mexican-based Catholic Conjure. I teach from the perspective of where does this fit into your life, and how can you work this into the work that you're already doing.
Oh, I love that. I so love that. So in other words, you're not making it a religion, or you must do it this way.
Right.
Kind of. Mm-hmm. And now I have a question on how people can start working with saints, because I heard you in this incredible video that I'm going to link up also below this video about Saint Anna. I'm still on Saint Anna because I just love her. Out of everything you were talking about with it, I loved all the saints that you were speaking of for the different reasons. The one that was singing to me was Saint Anna, Mary's mother, and I love that story. So how do people start working with saints if they want to start working with saints? Like, where do you start? I heard you say there are thousands of saints. Like, what?
Exactly. And I loved what you said in the podcast about resonance. And I think that that's a very good place to start. And I think, like, you know, go into a church, look at the statues, look at who's there, and see who really calls to you. Like, you know, it might be something within the iconography. Like, you know, like St. Lucy has her plate with eyes, which I brought here with her today. Like,
oh, good. You have the plate with eyes with St. Lucy.
With St. Lucy. Like, you know, and that's something that really resonates with me. And it's something, and I said, there's going to be something that calls out to you. And, you know, look into that, and then start doing your research and start getting to know who this person is. Because I look at the saints as knowing people. Like, you know, and how do we vibe with people? Like, you know, like even this connection right here, it's like, you know, we saw that we had this common ground, you know. So I tell people, find people who have the common ground with you, you know, and there's a saint for everything. Like, you know, if you like to bake, like, you know, there's saints for people who like to bake. Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who is the patron saint of bakers, you know.
What's her name again?
Saint Elizabeth of Hungary.
Hungary, the country?
The country, yes.
I thought you said Hungary, like there's a saint with a name Hungary on it. I'm crazy, forgive me. Okay, I'm clear now.
Yes, so Saint, who's the patron saint of bakers. So if you like baking, you know, like there's saints for everything. There's saints if, like, you know, if you have a certain illness, like, you know, Saint Rocco is the patron saint of those with cancer. Like, you know, there's a saint for everything. There's saints for Saint Sebastian if you're into sports. Saint Sebastian is the patron saint of athletes. So, like, you know, finding that common ground, somebody that you have common ground with, that you can begin starting having that conversation. I'll be really honest. Saint Sebastian comes with me to the gym because it's like, and so yeah, and so I have a little card of Saint Sebastian that I throw into my gym bag, and Saint Sebastian helps me with my workout, and that's the conversation that we have with each other, and that's the relationship that we have with each other. So Saint Sebastian's kind of like my gym buddy, and sometimes I make little pouches and charms with Saint Sebastian in it for that work. But I think starting to work with the saints is first seeing who you have resonance with, and then also looking to see who you have common ground with. Another way is also looking at the saint who was born on your birthday, which is a very traditional way of working that too. Usually patron saints come from the feast of the saint that's that saint day that you were born on. And so
is there a feast day on their own birthday? Is that how they just determine the feast day of the saints?
So most saints' feast days, unless we're not sure, so most saints' feast days are the day of their death. And so it's like their heavenly birthday, And then
the day of their transition. So they entered heaven that day. So that's their feast day.
It's their feast day. And so there's some variation with that, especially with saints who come from or saints who are basically pagan gods who have now been made saints, who have now
we reworked them, and we brought them over here now. Yeah,
we brought them over here now. Like, you know, like that's a little bit different, but you'll find within the concept of the saints' feast days is that sometimes these saints' feast days fall on different pagan holidays and things like that have that connection back to that polytheistic root. But like the other way is looking at who was born on the day, whose feast day is on the day that you were born. And sometimes that's more glaring because sometimes you'll have a list of like 50 saints who share the same feast day. And so, so sometimes doing it that way comes from a much more cultural perspective, because certain cultures have saints that they pay attention to more than others, depending on where you're born and what cultural context. But I think that the best way is really who resonates with you, what resonates with you, and then also just seeing who you have something in common with.
That is amazing. Now, question, when Saint Sebastian goes with you to the gym and when you work with the saints, do you make offerings? Is it similar to the Orishas or no?
So I do make offerings with my saints. It's much more of the embodiment. It's the embodiment of the practice. And of course, like the saints, because they were human, most of them, the grand majority of them were human. And so, like, you know, they have likes and they have dislikes. You know, they have foods that they like, they have certain things that they like. And it's like, you know, it's like if you're going to visit somebody at their house, like, you know, and this is the first time, like, you know, we bring something, you know, we bring like a cake, or we bring something.
Or something that they like, fruit or something.
And so it's the same way with the saints. We share this meal, and we share this connection. Because my favorite way of doing this is that I like to have wine with my saints. I do. I like to sit down and, like, because I'm an alcoholic, and like, and so Saint Michael is my favorite. Even though Saint Michael's is an angel, there's this connection with Saint Michael and like brown liquor. And so, like,
really?
Yes, like, you know, like Saint Michael like loves brandy, and so you know, me and Saint Michael will do brandy shots, like, you know. And so,
come on now, wow, you know, people just don't think in those terms,
right?
because we have them so elevated.
Also elevated, but they're so
like untouchables. They're way up there. Like they're saints after all.
But it's like, they love and they enjoy so much of what we love and enjoy. Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of musicians. And so Saint Cecilia loves when you play like your favorite song for her and things like that. And it doesn't even have to be a religious song. I wrote an article a couple, maybe about a year ago, where I said, I start my rosary sometimes with Cardi B's, fuck being good, I'm a bad bitch. But we love it. And it's like but it's such this human connection, and it's like I tell people, as long as it's from a place of respect and it's a place of love
and honor,
they're just like us, and they want to be friends with us, just like we would be friends with our normal friends and have conversations like we would. So I tell people, don't sugarcoat your language for them. Don't make it the things that has to be pious or anything like that. I swear like I cuss like a sailor, and so that's my conversation with them. If I think something, I'd be like, yo, like this shit was fucked up today.
What you gonna do about it?
Yeah, what you gonna do about it? How you gonna help me with this? And I think for me,
that's so honest though. It's so honest. And it's like, we don't have to put up this kind of what we would think of as this veneer of piety for them, because that's not what it is. They want you to come with honesty, and they want you to come with an open heart. What I'm feeling in this right now, the energy of integrity, because what I've seen a lot in the Christian paradigm is hypocrisy, not because we want to be hypocrites. It's because the religion told us you have to follow this impossible standard, which none of us were doing because we were all sexy people and doing whatever we felt like doing. Right. And so it made us kind of compartmentalize things. Well, over here I'm kind of like this, but I'm gonna be, I'm going to be pious, and I'm going to be good, and I'm going to say my prayers and come to Bible study and go to church. So what I'm hearing is integrity, that it doesn't breed hypocrisy. I mean, we don't want to be hypocrites. We want to be honest people. We want to be accepted for who we really are.
Exactly. And I can speak for this, that, I will be honest, Mary and St. Anne and some of the other saints have gotten me laid more often. And so that's right. But it's
I'll take those saints.
Yes. But I think that it's integrity, and it's like, when I was in these very kind of Orthodox Catholic youth groups and programs, and we would talk about our prayers, it's like I felt like I couldn't pray for what was really going on in my life. I felt that I couldn't work with them in a way because what would somebody say, and that's frowned upon,
Yeah, because they're all wanting to be priests and they're all celibate. You're like, please let me get laid tonight.
Exactly.
And they'd be like, what? You need, in the Christian paradigm, they would be like, you need Jesus. They would do it, laying on hands and a prayer shut in and all that kind of stuff.
And so, but I think that there's within the folk practice, because it is so real life oriented, there is that space of just being open and honest and working from that place of open and honesty with them.
How else can we come to the throne of grace other than open and honest and real?
Exactly. I was like, you got to be raw. I tell people, it's like with the divine, I am just raw. Because they know already. They know already. They already know. And it's funny. I went on a date one time, and one of my coworkers, and I was wearing a rosary, and she's like, you're not going to wear that on your date, because I was like, she's like, you're going to be a bad little boy. And I was like, Jesus has a front row seat to all my shenanigans. So Look, he got the popcorn. Hey, y'all. Yeah.
Come on. Jesus has a front row to all my shenanigans. That's a quotable right there. That is quotable. So tell us about Sacred Eyes Tarot. Where did that come from?
So Sacred Eyes Tarot. So I should say, so I have this long connection with St. Lucy. And so the church that when I became Catholic with St. Lucy's Catholic Church, my Orisha in Candomblé, my mother is Oshun, and also my head in Candomblé is also Oshun, but my particular path of Oshun is syncretized with St. Lucy. And so so I have a long history with St. Lucy being in my life from many different standpoints. And so St. Lucy, her story is that she was this beautiful young maiden who came from a Christian family at the time that Christianity was outlawed in Rome. So she had to keep her Christianity secret, and as many of the stories of the Virgin Martyrs go, St. Lucy, this guy wanted to marry her, and she had already given herself over to God and was like, nope, can't marry you because I'm a spouse of Jesus Christ and everything like that. And so because of this, he has her tortured. And so he has her whipped, and how the legend goes is that, you know, he would have her whipped and scourged, and the angels would come and heal her wounds. And in a certain part of the legend, her executioners tear out her eyes, and they're all struck blind at that moment. And so during that, she miraculously restores her eyes, and then also goes ahead to heal the rest of her torturers who have been struck blind. So within that, from that story, within traditional Roman Catholicism, we have St. Lucy as being the patron saint of those with eye problems and those who are afflicted with diseases of the eye, those who wear glasses, which is another overlay with me and St. Lucy. And so, but in the folk Catholic tradition, we celebrate St. Lucy as those with the third sight, those with clairvoyance, those who practice divination, those who are meant to see beyond the veil. And St. Lucy is an ally with that. So just like we have here, we have St. Lucy with her plate full of eyes. And so St. Lucy became kind of the natural ally for me in my work of divination, in my tarot card reading. So St. Lucy being my main ally, Sacred Eyes Tarot, became an ode and a homage to her in my work and the work that I do.
She's a powerful ally. You can just feel her presence.
And she don't play neither. She don't play. It's funny because we talk about, so there's two different permutations of St. Lucy. There's the one that comes from southern Italy, and then there's the one that's from the northern up in Sweden, where she's more kind of like, we want to feed you. So it's funny because I have another friend who's his lineage is also in Italian magic, and we talk about the different manifestations of St. Lucy, and it's like, you know, St. Lucy, like from southern Italy, like she's like a part of the mafia, like she want to cut a bit, like, you know.
Mafioso saint, huh?
She's a mafioso saint. And it's like, it's funny because when you go to Syracuse, where her relics are and her body is, which you don't see in this statue, is that her statue does carry a sword. And so with the plate of eyes, and she's carrying a sword. Yeah. And so, like, you know, she's carrying the plate of eyes and she also has the sword. And then, but when you go up to the north, like, you know, it's St. Lucy and she's carrying the tree. She has the wreath of candles on her head, and she's carrying the tray of cookies. And so it's like these they have the same quality of the light and shedding the light and being able to see and being able to see beyond, but the manifestations in their temperament is very different. And so
which St. Lucy more connects with you?
I'm a cut a bitch. We are a cut a bitch St. Lucy. So
the St. Lucy cut a bitch is my St. Lucy. Michael, my goodness, I wasn't expecting that one. I love it.
It's like we laying down the law with this one.
Let me tell you. I plays no games. That's the St. Lucy you rolling with. I plays no games.
And it's funny because a lot of the saints that I work with, I'm very attracted to very powerful women. And so like it's like a lot of the saints that have really kind of formed my court that I work with is a myriad of very powerful women. Saint Barbara, who is also who I like to call Saint Barbs or Babs, and so like so I call her like Babs, and so she's just this powerful woman who her story, and I won't get into the whole thing for the sake of times, is that at her execution, her own father executed her, and from the moment of her execution, just lightning fell from heaven and executed her father. And so
these saints, I mean, they are not to be trifled with.
They're not to be trifled with. So Saint Barbara, I look at Saint Barbara as like my main saint, next to Saint Michael, because Saint Michael is my name saint, and so we have this connection through the name. But Saint Barbara, if I need like protection, but if I need protection on a more physical level, Saint Michael's more for like my spiritual protection and more for kind of the outside of kind of the spiritual realm. But Saint Barbara is like, if somebody's messing with me in real life, I'd be like, yo, Babs, like, you know,
handle that.
Yes, handle that.
It's like saints who are hitmen too at the same time.
Oh yeah, because they don't fuck around. Like, you know, like, you know, and it's like some of them have like this mother energy where it's like, you don't fuck with my baby. Like, you know.
Yeah. The ones who are your caretakers on the other side of the veil, they have your whole space around you locked down. Like, people can't even really approach me or get into my sphere unless this posse lets them in. It just doesn't have the posse, they got it locked down. Yeah.
Like, I tell people, like, I don't even worry about so much anymore, because I was like, they just don't know the relationships that I have. Like, you know, like, you come for me, like, you really coming for them, and they gonna handle it. Like, you know.
And it's not. Yeah, it's not gonna. Look, my dad used to be like, don't start none, won't be none, and walk softly and carry a big stick. You know, my dad he is a very, very laid back person. He never even hit us at all. Discipline. It was always reading something from the Bible. My mom, she would wail on you with her shoe or her belt or whatever she had, right? But my father had this very, you know, those quiet waters kind of people that go deep, still waters run deep. He's that kind of person. And I learned a lot from that. And that's kind of how I feel about, because there's no outward displays of protection. I don't need it. I've walked through the streets of China at night. I've walked everywhere, a lot of places all over the world, places I didn't know the language, I didn't know much of anything. And this posse has it taken care of. It's taken care of.
Taken care of. Yeah. But it is, I think that the beautiful thing about the saints is the varied relationships that you will connect with them with. And because some of the saints, I just sit around and we just joke, like, you know, because sometimes they're funny, like, you know, like, it's just sometimes they're just like, this is like, you see this, like, watch this, like, you know. And it's like, but it's really that connection and that place of that kinship. And it's like, you know, I tell people, it's like your relationship with them are going to be so varied. Like, some are going to be strictly business, like, you know, some of them are going to be like, this is contractual, you know, I hold up my part of the deal and you hold up your part of the deal and we keep it moving, like, you know. And it's like people, it's exactly like people. Some of those relationships are going to be your friends for life. Some of them, it's going to be purely, we do this business and we part ways, like, you know, and call me when you need me again, like, you know.
Because maybe some of the saints, maybe in their life, they were an attorney and that's how they operated. Or maybe they were, I don't know, doctors, and maybe they operate like that. Maybe some were nurses in their comportment, where the nurses are really taking care of you as you go through your healing process. So it seems like all of them have different flavors, just like all the beings in upper, in alternate dimensions. They're like humans. I mean, there's billions of different kinds of people. There's billions and trillions of different kinds of spirits.
Yes. It's like Saint Expedite, who I have a really strong relationship with, but it's like Saint Expedite is like that lover who, it's like, he comes in and then like he'll ghost for like a year. And then like when he's ready to do the work, he's like, yo, I'm here. And I was like, well, let's roll. Like, you know.
You're ready for him when he comes up. Okay, that's good. So now, as we conclude, what would you like everyone viewing to know about this incredible path of Catholic conjure, Catholic folk magic, cultivating relationships with the saints, what would you like to leave with our audience?
What I'd like to say is that this really is a path where it doesn't matter where you come in from, whether you come in from a Christian background, whether you come in from a more polytheistic background, whether if you're not connected with any of those schools of thought at all, that there is a place for you in this practice, and there is a place where you can really connect. Sometimes it's just that you have to find it, and it is a very wide open practice that anybody can really plug themselves into. And before we leave, I wanted to show this because we did mention it in the podcast, but this is the picture book that I first encountered when I was a child in the Catholic school system, that really got me started with the saints that I bought later on as an adult. And it's like, if you're just looking to kind of stick your toe in it, get yourself a little picture book, get yourself a little picture book of saints and just start reading their stories, start looking at the iconography and seeing who you really connect with. And I'm always here to have a conversation about working with the saints and how ways to come into, so you can always find me at Saintly Tarot Mystic on Instagram or through the other outlets that I have, and I'd be more than welcome to have a conversation on how to connect with this work.
I love that. And we're going to link up all of your deliciousness below, because you also do tarot readings, correct?
I also do tarot readings. I also offer candle services. A lot of the magical work that I offer for my clients is in the form of candle work with the saints, with dressing the candles with the appropriate herb allies, and then working with the saints for your intentions also. The other thing is the beautiful shadow boxes that I make, which are
I fell in love with those when I saw them online. Oh my goodness.
Get some light, but this is my way, other than kind of amulet work. I look at the shadow boxes as doing kind of amulet and charm work. This is to the Virgin of Montevergine, and here, if you can barely see them, she has obsidian crystal for protection, and then she has rose quartz on the top for love. And so that's kind of my answer to doing charm work also, but I also do charm bags and things like that also. And so any of the work that needs to be done, we can work through it together.